Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, the Green Bard. This is Kingsblood 4, a primer on zombies, our Halloween edition. So here's a quick Halloween post about one of the most important subjects in A Song of Ice and Fire, the undead. Zombies. Really it's just an excuse to talk about resurrection, specifically Jon's, but it will take a while for me to work my way up to that. First we'll talk about some other zombies. And there are lots of zombies lurking in every corner of Westeros and Essos in our story. Resurrected humans, that is. They are fascinating too, because in what the fattest leech of Ice and Fire calls Martin World, George R. R. Martin repeats themes, but never exactly, always with a new flourish. That method is no different with George R. R. Martin's zombies in A Song of Ice and Fire. It starts in our very first chapter, with the undead wildlings presumably getting up and walking away. And it culminates with the whiting of Sir Waymar Royce. It sets up the whites as a model for zombies in the story, zombies controlled by others, the White Walkers. A concept very reminiscent of the ideas George R. R. Martin wrote about in his Corpse Handler trilogy. The mystery of what the others in their undead white slave army are up to, and where and when and how they will strike, is certainly one of the most horrifying underpinnings of our story. True to form though, George R. R. Martin then goes on to create all sorts of other undead people for our story who don't quite fit that prototype. I think it is worth trying to make a list of them here, though I'll almost certainly fail miserably in the endeavor. Off the cuff: 1. Khal Drogo. 2. Patchface. 3. Lord Beric Dondarrion. 4. The physical bodies of the Undying of Qarth. 5. Lady Stoneheart, Catelyn Tully. 6. Sir Robert Strong, Gregor the Mountain Clegane. 7. Cold Hands. Then there are the presumably dead, or at least nearly dead and undeniably transformed people, kept alive by some form of magic. 1. Melisandre. 2. Aeron the Damp-Hair Greyjoy. 3. Moqorro. 4. Victarion Greyjoy. 5. Sandor Clegane. 6. Lord Bloodraven and the other children of the forest that Bran finds while exploring the cave while inside Hodor's body. As Hodor, he explored the caves. He found chambers full of bones, shafts that plunged deep into the earth, a place where the skeletons of gigantic bats hung upside down from the ceiling. He even crossed the slender stone bridge that arched over the abyss and discovered more passages and chambers on the far side. One was full of singers, enthroned like Brendan, in nests of weirwood roots that wove under and through and around their bodies. Most of them looked dead to him, but as he crossed in front of them, their eyes would open and follow the light of the torch, and one of them opened and closed a wrinkled mouth as if he were trying to speak. We also have those who suffered from grayscale, whom some, like Val, would describe as being dead. 1. The Shrouded Lord. 2. Shireen Baratheon. 3. Jon Connington, and whoever he'll infect next. What's more, we have skin changers living their second lives inside beasts. 1. Orell. 2. Varamir Sixskins. 3. The Children of the Forest inside the ravens that Bran skin changes. 4. Roose Bolt-On, if you subscribe to that theory. I don't. The related concept of skin changing is similar to the topic of telepathic mind control featured in Fever Dream and other stories by George. While the concept of a second life is somewhat based upon the ideas about soul transfer explored in Night Flyers and The Glassed Flower, one related final category is the concept of collective consciousness, where potentially the essences of many souls in our story come to rest at the end of their mortal lives. These include: 1. The corrupt blue heart of the Undying of Qarth. 2. The Weirwood Network. 3. Maybe something associated with the Faceless Men / House of Black and White. 4. Probably there's more. Some of the legends in Essos, as discussed in the World of Ice and Fire, suggest it anyway. These collective consciousnesses are reminiscent of other collective consciousnesses that George R. R. Martin has written about in his past works, such as the Grishka in A Song for Leah, the Fungus in The Men of Greywater Station, the Mudpots of Guardians, the Sand Kings of Sand Kings, and whatever it is that is going on with the Janeshee in And 7 Times Never Kill Man. So that's a pretty extensive zombie list, though certainly not exhaustive. So why do we want to talk about this? Why is it so important? Well, George has suggested in interviews and other word-of-mouth accounts that some of these resurrections are foreshadowing events to his most important resurrection in the series, that of Jon Snow. Obviously, the topic of Jon's impending book resurrection is one of the most popular subjects in this fandom. My second ever post on Reddit was about it, and it kinda holds up. You can find a link to it in my accompanying blog post, but I suggest you finish here first. Now, my thoughts about Jon Snow's resurrection have evolved since writing that, but those thoughts are what this series and my Direwolves of Winterfell series are working up to. I believe that each entry on that list of undead can inform us a bit about what Jon is doing right now, and about what he will become. It is part of my Kingsblood series because I think that to be resurrected as a whole human being, to be mostly yourself and not just a mindless wight, you need to have the gift, as Faramir calls it in the A Dance with Dragons prologue. My interpretation is that Kingsblood and the gift are the same thing, magical power in your blood that enables you to take part in the supernatural, whether or not it actually ever manifests during your mortal lifetime. So to start, I want to discuss two zombies in particular that I think there is ample evidence that they also possess Kingsblood. First is Khal Drogo, named by Viserys, Aegon the Dragon Lord Come Again, and Catelyn Tully, aka Lady Stoneheart, Mother Merciless, the Hangwoman. I've already covered some of why I think Drogo is exceptional, that I think he has Kingsblood in earlier Kingsblood episodes and in my Dany's Dragon Bonds series. I encourage you to watch those videos, but I'll make a bit more of the case here. While certainly not limited to this, there are three main legs to the argument. 1. Horsemanship, especially that of Lyanna Stark, is integral to our tragic backstory, and I surmise that it is how her skin-changing ability manifests itself. Drogo is none other than the most gifted horseman among the most gifted horse lords in the world. I think the idea quite logical that he had a skin-changing bond with his red stallion. 2. Drogo seems intent on combining his exceptional genes with the Kingsblood of the last dragon-riding family of old Valyria to birth the stallion who mounts the world. Viserys allows it, while proclaiming him Aegon the Dragon Lord Come Again. 3. The way in which Mirri Maz Duur first kills his horse, the beast to which he'd be bonded if truly a skin changer, before proceeding on with the ritual that leaves him brain dead, but with a living body. We'll discuss this ritual more now. In this scene, the Dothraki described Mirri Maz Duur as a magi, performing blood magic. While they are prone to hyperbole, I don't think the Dothraki wrong here. But what is blood magic? Well, who really knows? Other than the fact that blood and sometimes death, only death can pay for life, seem important aspects of it. Let's try to understand the mechanism of this particular blood magic with a bit of fun tinfoil. Imagine that there's a central aspect of blood magic, the transfer, call it a spell, the transfusion spell. Sounds a bit scientific, eh? Yeah, well, you should be aware that George R. R. Martin was a sci-fi writer for most of his career, right? So let's allow the stretch for a bit. Mirri says, only death can pay for life, but I think it's really just blood that's required for a person to be saved. The loss of blood usually ends in death, especially in the world without actual modern medicine and the magic of blood transfusions. Drogo was dying of an infection, so in the eyes of modern medicine he really needed his blood to be cleansed of bacteria and their associated toxins, similar to dialysis. Let's imagine her plan was to drain a bunch of bad blood, think Roose Bolton's leeching, then to replace it with healthy blood. This certainly wouldn't be the horse's blood. Putting the horse's blood into Drogo's veins would kill him, any doctor would tell you that. I know, I'm getting scientific again. But he was probably actually already dead at this point because of the drained blood. Her magic would be to revive him with the blood from the babe. The key point here, regardless of my tinfoil, is that when Drogo dies at this point, if things were left to nature, his soul would have entered the red stallion. But it can't because Mirri killed it first. In doing so, she doomed him to his first death being his final death. When she brought his body back with blood magic, it was an empty vessel. One last argument in favor of my tinfoil. Now, the babe was described as having grave worms and being a monstrosity. Well, if she had siphoned off all its blood in the ritual, it would be a shriveled monstrosity. So in summary, here's the mechanism I propose for Drogo's death and resurrection. 1. Before Mirri did any blood magic, she allowed him to become brain dead. 2. She wanted this outcome. Her procedure never went awry. 3. She purposefully killed his horse so that he couldn't warg into him for a second life. 4. Once the horse was dead, his consciousness was trapped in his own body. 5. She drained his blood enough to cause the brain death. His soul slowly dissipated, with nowhere to go. Note, the YouTuber Glitus suggests that she somehow bound her soul to herself. Is that shadow binding? Perhaps. Either way, I think it fully fits with my theory if that's what actually happened. 6. She then magicked enough blood into him to heal his body, killing the babe, but not bringing back the man. So I know you are all going to say, what's this BS about transfusions and replacing blood? This is magic. Red priests and magi aren't surgeons, they're wizards. First, the tinfoil isn't required for the theory. The only thing that's required is to understand that she killed his horse purposefully to make sure he had no second life. Secondly, I'm not trying to deny magic here, only attempting an explanation of the mechanism of the magic. George R.R. Martin has stated many times that he writes about a fantasy world that is more like real life. Take for example the interview where he gives the tour of his house and tells the interviewer that his dragons don't have forepaws, so they are anatomically correct when compared to other dinosaurs, reptiles, and birds found on Earth. Now, I'm not suggesting there's a true scientific explanation for everything he's written. We know that his writing employs telepathy and telekinesis extensively, but I think he tries to be as consistent as possible with the nature of his magic. I don't want to get too deep into it, but in a nutshell, he supports E=mc², the law of conservation of energy and mass. I think. The blood to save Drogo's body wasn't conjured out of thin air because that would take a tremendous amount of energy. It was moved from place to place. It came from somewhere. At least that's the idea that I'm operating under. I don't really know if that's what he thinks or not. It doesn't really matter. However, I also liken the healing to be more like real medicine because of Miri's association with Marwyn. Miri studied under Marwyn, as did who else but Qyburn. Qyburn, who was kicked out of the Citadel for opening the bodies of living men to study the mysteries of life. One might call what he did surgery, though also not with the intent to heal that specific subject, clearly. Certainly Marwyn, being the free thinker that he is, would have learned from Qyburn's experimentation, and why would he not share whatever healing knowledge he gleaned from it with future pupils? It's also possible that he secretly continued the study of living flesh behind closed doors. Either way, I think the association with Marwyn suggests that Mirri Maz Duur has strong knowledge of human anatomy and physiology to go with her other healing arts and any magic she learned in Asshai. So, that's it for Zombie Drogo, whose essence was no longer there inside his empty vessel of a body when Mirri Maz Duur was finished with him. Next we tackle Cat, but this episode is already too long, so we'll have to do that next time. I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to your comments. Thanks. Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video. If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.